In some ways, the idea, the phrase of cultural sustainability, um, it it points to something new, but I think it also it labels or symbolizes something that is quite venerable, something that is quite a part of, I guess, the active human condition. And has, that it has been for a long time. You're doing the work already. You're doing important things about keeping the cultivation of the spirit, as Cicero put it when he first really brought the term culture from its roots, literally and figuratively, in agriculture to really talking about human activity. You're cultivating the spirit of place, the spirit of people, the spirit of the bio community that we're all part of.
So I would date it back to about 1982 or 3 that I began taking a bit of an interest in what was going on downtown and what actually made New Albany into a city, which I think was stillborn until I started traveling in Europe. And when I started going on trips to Europe when I was 24, 25 years old, then I would come back and look around and say, okay, well, how come I just went to all these really interesting places in Europe that had this vibrant downtown culture, and I'm standing in the middle of what is in effect a dead zone? And why is that? And it took me another 15 years to even begin to understand, but that was where my head was at then. It's like, okay, yeah, I've been to places where there's all kinds of stores and businesses and people living downtown, and then New Albany then was essentially very dead. That was the nadir, I'm sure, of New Albany in terms of a civic or in terms of a municipal area downtown. And gradually kind of doping that out, trying to figure out why that was. And when I was in business on the north side at the public house and the pizzeria for all those years, I was kind of distracted. And it wasn't until about 2000 that I started getting on my bicycle and going downtown again and still trying to figure out, oh, yeah, there's bound to be something we can do with this. I've been to Lodo in Denver. I've been to Bamberg in Germany. Why is it like this? And what can we do about that? And that's kind of where it started.
We have moments, we have possibilities in our own society where there are these times out of time, where there are these places of generativity and contemplation and the possibility of change.
So I began to get interested in something beyond just drinking lots of beer, lots of golden colored liquid, probably about the time I got out of college, really, about 1982. And had some help in this from a cousin who's a university professor in Florida named Don Berry, who was able to direct me to some books, amongst which would be the Michael Jackson World Guide to Beer, and then later the New World Guide to Beer. And so as I had this evolving consciousness about wanting to go and see Europe, then there was very much a part of that was, well, but that's where you go to get the good beer. You're going to go to Germany. You're going to go to Belgium and England. In the beginning, it was more Germany than anything else. And so I go to Europe. I'm learning about beer. You go to a place like Germany. You see that it's just different. That you go to a beer hall someplace, or to a beer garden's a better example. And the first time that I ever experienced that was a place in Salzburg, actually, not in Germany, but in Austria, that was called the Augustiner Brewery, and there was a beer garden there, and I couldn't help but notice, sometime in 1985, in June perhaps, that I'm in the Augustiner having some beers, and there are children playing at the playground on the side of it, and there are people who are not just out there to get real drunk. It wasn't something like we experienced here at home, where you'd go to the Mount St. Francis picnic and everybody'd get hammered. Well, this was a Mount St. Francis picnic every day. Just a part of life. And so it begins to dawn on me that there is, that putting together these various testimonies from books written by somebody older than me and by what I was seeing myself, it was just very different. So this sort of notion began and in my brain that, well, I don't know, they're doing it different there, and since Germans came here at some point, maybe we used to do it different here, and then something happened in the intervening time, and we're not the same anymore, and obviously America is not the same as Europe now. The people came here, and it became a different place.
That's one very important and useful way of using culture, is to look at the idea of a kind of elevated, attentive, humanistically caring development of capacity and knowledge, and creativity. So, this is the cultural sector, the people that are sort of at the edge of making things new and who are actually appreciating and caring deeply about the collective works of their communities, and preserving and sharing those things as heritage in one way or the other.
The fact that New Albany had a pretty progressive brewery, 80 years ago, putting out, a big once a year, stout release and a couple of different hoppy beers and, some really good, German style, Pilsners and lagers, It's pretty fucking cool that, New Albany has that history, that there was this, kind of forward-thinking brewery all the way back then. I see, I see the connection to the modern times, with New Albanian, without us looking back as a brewing company on our own, local culture, I don't think we can competently move forward, without embracing and respecting that history. Because it's true, and I mean that's the case in lots of parts of the country. There's these brewing cultures and histories that are almost completely lost. And places that haven't had any breweries come back even yet. Where they used to have them. And we need to respect and nurture that history and pass it on. Because I mean that's key.
The place angle of it was just something that I now take so much for granted, but it was the pub or the beer garden or whatever you want, the beer hole or the place where you go to drink, really becoming a place in and of itself. It's not just somewhere where you go to drink as much as you can and then try to navigate your way home. It was someplace where you had an extended family. And we always would have had that here. We had a TV series called Cheers. But the thing that was, it wasn't about, it was still valid, but there was more to it. And I think what that eventually came down to was trying to take those lessons, apply them to a business here, and see if anybody would go for it. Finding out that there was a great deal of resonance in that. By the time we got into the 2000s and we were contemplating expanding the business and having a second brewery, at that point I was very much interested in what could be done to assist in the revitalization of that formerly dead zone that was in downtown New Albany, and it seemed like the brewery would be a good thing to do that, again, because I had seen that in places.
When we first started looking at buildings and walking around, I mean, there was a lot of spaces, there was a lot of places, and now it's like, you come down here on the weekend, you have trouble finding a place to park, and we're, Bank Street's just a couple of years old. The turnaround has been fantastic to watch, and the fact that we could kind of help be a part of that. I mean, that was the idea. I mean, granted, we could have just threw a brewery in Industrial Park on the north side of town and started cranking out more beer, and that'd been fine and dandy. But part of the project down here was to be part of downtown, was to have a place for people to come, was to have the front of house, to have a restaurant, a tap room, a bar, patios, have a place where we can have events and have festivals and really make an impact, help bring people down here.
There's good beer from someplace. If you can go to that place, it seems like that beer's better. if you're there where it's made, and if that is part of a community, if there can be a community here that embraces that, not just with beer, but in small business in general, and things that are unique and things that are well done, small, diversified, evidence of a guiding intelligence of some individual who has an idea for something. How does that lead to a larger urban context? I think it is to try to support those things that lead to that uniqueness.
You know, it's going to take a while for, I think, you know, American culture to like fully, like, you know, from a majority standpoint to grasp on to all of this. But those of us that are, you know, wise to it now, you know, there's a lot of cool things happening in, you know, in regional food and regional beer, you know, just in regional mentality. You know, and I think it's only going to get better. It's not some like flash in the pan, you know. It's kind of a re-embracing of our history, of our roots. You know, we used to, you know, we're such a connected global society now, but it still is like so important, you know, what, you know, our local aspects are. You know, it's like, you know, no farmers, no food, you know, no brewers, no beer, you know. No goats, no cheese. I mean, we need these things.
In other words, like, okay, there are stories of place. There is a sense of place that is to be, you know, that sort of, it needs to be safeguarded. It needs to be stewarded. It needs to be archived. It needs to be made accessible. You know, there's a whole, you know, world of doing this effectively, and to sort of, I don't think that is in some ways sufficient. It's not the only mandate for institutions involved that are interested in heritage. What heritage is in the past something of some kind of aesthetic or ethical significance happened it becomes, it's only important insofar as when we look at it, we are reminded of our own aesthetic and ethical possibilities. So when we look at, you know, a beautiful historic building, we can imagine the work and the kind of care and the creativity that went into the construction of this, and we can see that in ourselves, and it should be an inspiration for us to be doing those things. So the stories of the past become in some ways an opportunity for us to act in such a way that we'll be telling our own stories.
It seems to me like the place, the local, the foundation, that is the essence of it. If you live someplace, if you visit someplace, you're going there because it has something to recommend it. So then can we take some of these things we learned from the beer culture and say that, look, we need to have our own culture in this place. It's about us.